chart. It could be COVID. It could be politics. It could be the cracks in the ground. I hope no one else is, I've caught myself. So you're walking along and you trip over a crack in the sidewalk and you get mad at the sidewalk. So there's a way to tell if you're at this why me stage. There's a lot of noise in your life, a lot of drama, excuse me, complaining. And you likely have the back of your hand Velcroed to your forehead, like, you know, why is this happening to me again? Or if only they wouldn't do that, I'd be happy. So it's definitely a victim stage. You know, something's happening to you. And the opportunity for awakening from this stage is pretty huge. We have to give up blame of anyone or anything and take responsibility for our own lives. We have the opportunity to awaken to the truth that we're not victims of circumstances, fate, the economy, the weather, our parents, our spouses. We have the opportunity to awaken to the truth that we are powerful and empowered beings. And we have the very nature, as Janie mentioned in her beautiful introductory prayer, we have that very nature of Source, which is the ability to create. And once we kind of get that locked in, we move to the second kingdom of awakening, or state of spiritual consciousness. And this is called the by me, or metaphysician stage. And likely a lot of us are metaphysicians, or like to call ourselves that, or pretend we're that, or we are that sometimes. And we know we're not victims of circumstance. We're kind of like magicians a little bit with the realm of thought. And we begin to understand that we're a part of something bigger than we are, much bigger. And there are laws in the universe that work in precise and specific ways with this something bigger than we are. And we can learn to work in harmony with it. Ernest Holmes writes in The Science of Mind, we are thinking, willing, knowing, conscious centers of life. We are surrounded by, immersed in, and there is flowing through us a creative something. The sum total of all our thought, will, purpose, and belief creates a tendency in this law that causes it to react to us according to the sum total of that belief. So ignorance of the law excuses no one from its effects. If then certain specific ways of thought and belief have produced limitations, well, there are other beliefs that will change those limitations. So learning at this stage that things don't just happen to us, but happen according to what's in our belief system, we really begin to pay attention to what do we believe. And you might notice every few years that could change a little bit. We learn that we can change our thinking and change our lives. In this stage, we learn that we are creative beings. And this is a very, very empowering place. And we all need to awaken to that, spend more time in that if we're not, so we can experience the beauty of life that Spirit intends for us. This stage is where we learn tools like affirming, visualizing, vision boards, and spiritual mind treatments or affirmative prayers, like Janie did so beautifully. We learn we can see it with our mind's eye and feel that it's done, and we can create it. My friends, we do. New Thought has done a wonderful job teaching this, but this is not the final stage of our evolution in consciousness. There's an opportunity for greater awakening, and this stage we could say is the we make things happen, and in the next stage we make things welcome. So the third stage is through me, or the mystic. And in the third stage, we begin to release control. We don't hold on to life so tightly. We replace it with the sense of a personal relationship with something much more powerful than we are. At this stage, we begin to realize we're spiritual beings having a human experience. It's called the through me or mystic stage. And before you freak out and think like, well, that's probably the people that sit on the top of the mountains, cross-legged, wearing, kind of silly robes and saying, oh, all day. Well, that's not so. Ernest Holmes said succinctly, the mystic is one who senses the divine presence. The mystic feels God's presence. Perhaps not all the time, but certainly has extreme moments of feeling it. The through me or mystical stage of our evolution of consciousness is where we surrender more and more to the divine, where we desire to simply be an open vessel for God. It's the mystic who says, use me, oh God. I stand for you, and here I'll abide as you show me all that I must do. Use me for the purpose that thy wisdom chooses. So we find we're not so attached to a particular outcome, and our lives become a little more relaxed and receptive. This actually makes us more available to our greatest good. And in this stage of evolution, we bring in some other spiritual tools like visioning, present moment awareness, forgiveness. At this stage, our prayers take on a different focus. Rather than for the purpose of manifesting something for ourselves or hopefully the world, they're more like prayers of willingness and openness. And Ernest Holmes writes, true prayer must be, thy will be done. But we get kind of freaked out about that sometimes because we think we're submitting to something that could be a limitation or maybe lead to some kind of evil. But we have the knowledge that the will of God is always, always good. So while the stage of the mystic is very, very, very powerful, there is yet another. And that is the as me or master kingdom. So the Christ, the Buddha, a combination of the metaphysician and the mystic. Jesus is often our primary example of a master teacher. At this stage, there is an absolute union with the divine. No sense of separation, no division. Joel Goldsmith wrote, "Do not pray to God for things. Pray to know God, and all the things will simply appear." I think he got that from Jesus. When a master sees lack, she knows it's just a place for calling forth more of God into expression. It's just an opportunity to experience more of God. And this is how Jesus could turn water into wine, feed the thousands, heal the sick, raise the dead. When he was faced with lack or limitation, he often went and meditated first, and often in nature. But when he was faced with lack or limitation, he saw it as an opportunity to experience, to invite in more of God, to go into his universal consciousness, which he might have thought even for a moment had left, but it never did. So Ernest Holmes' final words in the final conclusion of Science of Mind says, "The essence of spiritual mind healing and of all true religious philosophy is an inner realization of the presence of perfection within and around about." I like that, the presence of perfection. "It is the hope of heaven, the voice of God proclaiming, 'I am that which thou art. Thou art that which I am.'" So the as me state of consciousness, the master, how do we work towards that? Wayne Dyer, when asked what was his ultimate goal in life, said without hesitation, God realization. The masters lived and worked in the world, realizing their connection, realizing their inseparability from God. And how many of you have heard of Meher Baba? If you've heard of him, or maybe you read one of his books, maybe some years ago, God Speaks 1 and 2 and Discourses, I remember picking them up, and at that time I had a lot of trouble with the word God. And now, I'm starting to like, well, source, I'm getting tired of source, but we know what we're talking about anyways. So I am reading his work now, and I find it amazingly accurate. I feel only a person with God realization could have written this. And so I'm not any expert on this, but I am developing a firm realization that this is truth, what he's speaking. So Meher Baba has this idea of the man God. And he says God as God alone is not consciously man. And man as man alone is not consciously God. Now that's like kind of deep. I'm going to say that again. God as God alone is not consciously man. You're going to see how this drama was created for all of our benefits. And man as man alone is not consciously God until we have this hybrid called the man God. And the man God is consciously God as well as man. The man God is living in both those worlds. The man God never lose their God consciousness, even for an instant, even when they sleep. They can be engaged in all sorts of activities in relation to creation, helping in the world, and they don't lose that connection. So there's another word I want to put out here. You likely haven't heard it: involution. Involution. And Meher Baba says that involution is the inner path of the human soul to the self, with a capital S. The soul wearies of the world and is ready to begin the third phase of the journey. So consciousness of the soul goes through evolution, reincarnation, and finally involution. And this is seen as the ascent back to God, or what we call ascension. And Meher Baba states that evolution is the soul's gathering of full consciousness. Reincarnation is the state of ordinary people. That's us caught up in karma. We reincarnate over and over. And then involution finally is the inner journey of the spiritual pilgrim back to its origin through higher planes of consciousness. And he lists 7 inner planes of consciousness, which are beyond our ordinary state. The human experience is called gross consciousness because it's largely focused in the gross physical world. So reincarnation is a necessary part of the process of the advancement of consciousness. But that consciousness, after so many lifetimes, it has accumulated impressions. They could be called sanskaras, but impressions of all the good and not so good experiences in all of those lives. They are pretty much stuck in our consciousness. And finally, we come to a place where, and after a lot of diversity in our reincarnations, we have to really experience everything. Some wonderful incarnations and some maybe we wouldn't think were so much. But through the opposites at work, we experience all of that. But finally, it's like, I've had enough. We're at a stalemate. Our soul says, what's next? And then we begin to turn inward. And that's the path of involution. So at that stage, our gross conscious human soul begins to lighten up and let go a little and disassociate from experiencing the great highs and lows, the impressions that we receive from all our experience. We kind of remove ourselves from that a little. So now let's talk about love. And what does love have to do with becoming a man God? So love is that which God is, and that which I am and you are. There is only love. But humans are here to learn to love beyond human love. We're here to learn divine love. When true love is awakened in the aspirant, one who aspires to union with God, it leads him to the realization of God and opens up the unlimited field of lasting and unfading happiness. The happiness of God realization is the goal of all creation. I'm going to say that again. The happiness of God realization is the goal of all creation. And I'm not just talking about the final human achievement. I'm talking about the love story of all times, the greatest love story ever told, but it needs more telling because it is so beautiful. In divine love, the lover, cleverly disguised as you and me, and the beloved, or God, become one. At this stage, the aspirant has stepped out of the domain of duality and becomes one with God, or divine love is God. When the lover and the beloved are one, that's the end and the beginning. We get so excited about, oh, we're in a process of ascension, or oh, we're releasing our light bodies. And those things are true, but they're really just the next step in a very lengthy cosmic process. So don't be in a hurry. There will always be one more rung on the ladder. So here's the love story. It is for love that the whole universe sprang into existence. And it is for the sake of love that it is kept going. So let me explain. God descends into the realm of illusion because of the apparent duality of the beloved and the lover. The whole world of duality is only an illusion. And I've heard the term the shadow of God, because if God is the source and the center and everything comes from that, it would be, the world would be the shadow of God. But this illusion has come into being for a wonderful, significant purpose. God needed this duality. The development of love is conditioned and sustained by the tension of duality. God has to suffer apparent differentiation into a multiplicity of souls in order to carry on the game of love. His, her conscious universe sprang forth for the enjoyment of his own divinity. The sweetness of love, God's love within us, is finding its way back home. The happiness of God realization, you're going to get blown away by this, is ultimately for God's happiness. For it is God, source, playing in this earthly theater as you and me. The happiness of the aspirants increases as they come in closer proximity and intimacy with the divine beloved. But at first, the beloved remains externalized as other. You know, I need to see your face. The individualized soul, where we're still largely at, has no access to the infinite bliss of the God state because we're suffering from our rather ignorant identification with the limited mind that we have. The happiness of the God realized is an inalienable aspect of the God state. It never leaves. It can't be removed in any way. There is no duality. The consciousness of man-God is never separate from God consciousness, even for a moment. He's not working through his finite mind, but invites the universal mind to work through him. The man-God doesn't have all the pains and pleasures of duality. He doesn't have any emptiness or any vanity of a separative ego. He's consciously one with all life. The man-God understands that creation does not exist as anything but the changing, the shadow of God. God is the eternal, real existence. So knowing that true nature of the world, the man-God is not so entangled in the gross world. He is always conscious of the God consciousness, and he keeps working in the world of forms, which are his forms, creating more knowledge of the self, God realization in every soul. So I'm winding down here. The happiness of God realization is the goal of all creation. When one becomes God, everything else is zero. The happiness of God realization cannot suffer curtailment by anything. It's self-sustained, eternally fresh, unfading, boundless, indescribable. And it is for this happiness that the world has sprung into existence. So, in conclusion, during our lifetimes, we will spend time in all of the kingdoms. It's not a linear process. Depending on the issue or situation at hand, we'll switch metaphorical residences. So remember the invitation in the beginning to truly awaken this year to the beauty of life that Spirit intends for you to live. What are you going to awaken to this morning? To the realization that if you're hanging out in the why me or mortal stage, that you have an opportunity to embody the truth that you are a powerful and empowered being and endowed with the very nature of source which created you. So you have the ability to create. Are you ready to master manifesting? Or is it to the realization that while the by me or metaphysical kingdom is absolutely vitally necessary, it's not the end, and you can awaken to something more powerful? The truth that you don't have to make things happen. You don't have to be so forceful in your life. You can welcome life and it will show up for your highest good. Welcome giving up control, relaxing. Something greater will come to you so that you become the mystic, where you allow God to consciously work through you. Not my will, but thine. Or in 2022, are you ready to cultivate as me consciousness? to step into the kingdom of the Master, where there is no separation and there is only love. My hope is you become the lover who loses himself in the being of the beloved and knows that he is one with the beloved. In this state of infinity, the lover has no being apart from the beloved. He is the beloved himself. Live with the consciousness that you are always in the presence of God. Gradually, you will come to know that yourself and the presence of God are one. Thank you for your patience. And so it is.